This video is my review of Andrew Soldice's crowning achievement of a game known as Tunic. And while you can already tell that I have a lot of excitement for the game, one thing that should be noted is the game took a lot of inspiration and drew a lot of comparisons from Zelda, but it's really important to note that there's a lot more going on here than just that. I would even make a comparison that it's more like Dark Souls than anything, but I don't want comparisons, as it were, to be reductive. So I'm going to go into my full thoughts on Tunic. To go ahead and get the need-to-knows out of the way, Tunic is on the Xbox platforms as well as Xbox Game Pass and PC. Now it should be noted that it is coming to PlayStation later this year, but currently it's not out at the time of this review. And the retail price is $29.99, and with that price you're going to be getting a pretty decent amount of playtime of about 12 to 14 hours in my experience, but How Long to Beat, however, does say that you could get about 20 hours of padded out playtime if you're looking for all the collectibles. But with that out of the way, let's jump right into the review. The story of Tunic is pretty simple. You're a lone hero wearing a green shirt with a sword and shield in a mysterious land trying to assemble a trifecta of awesome power, all while acquiring upgrades to your arsenal and your own skill set. Sound familiar? Yet again, I don't mean this at all as an insult. If anything, I'm stating that it can actually be compared to Zelda or any other inspirations in a truly meaningful way. I don't want to take any of this away, and when I get into further comparisons later, I want you to think that maybe this is the best possible version, because Tunic is amazing. Tunic is a great game, and here's why. Now, much like my last Game Pass review of Trek to Yomi, Tunic gets a lot of credit from me for its visual style. The minimalist approach makes everything really easy to identify while also leaving plenty of leeway for hidden corridors in plain sight and other secrets to find. Though I will say that sometimes a lot of these are almost too easy to miss unless you're really just running along all the walls or looking for really obscure things, or of course, the pro strat of following a guide. Another thing I thought that was really interesting is a lot of the creature designs and enemies that you're facing are all really cool looking, but I'll save a lot of my talk about the enemies in the combat section of the game. But however, going off of those character models as well as the environments, Tunic actually supplements this with a pretty colorful palette that varies very deeply between which environment you're actually in. You'll go from the dark underground, the deep forests, and sunny beaches all the way around to the frosted mountaintops. And Tunic always delivers on the visual front, and that's something I'll hammer in right away. The visuals are one of the greatest draw for this, for its similarities to other games, as well as the fact that it has its own unique visual style. It sets itself apart from any predecessors that you will have in mind, and all the while doing so at some of the best quality I think I've ever seen from a game of this price. Now next up, to go along with the visuals, we have the audio design. And I'm going to say it's pretty subdued for the most part. First up, you will have your boss combat tracks, which do their job, of course, of getting you in the mood to fight, but the main exploration tracks are what give the game its real true feeling of calmness, which really can't be overstated given just how difficult the game truly can be at times between enemy placement and just straight up hard enemies to fight. So overall, even though the game has a sense of almost dread during the combat experiences, the music itself overall let me come away feeling calm through most of the scenarios, especially when the game should be super frustrating, which I won't lie, at times it is, and that is a criticism I could note. But back to the audio for just a second. Outside of the music, the actual sound effects are pretty good. Every attack holds a lot of weight, and that's helped greatly by the little crunches shot straight into your ear holes every time you hit something. Now, I have tiptoed around the difficulty of the game, so let's go ahead and jump straight into the gameplay, where I think a lot of the fun of the game does come from. Now, there are two main facets of gameplay to go over here, and that's between the combat as well as the exploration and collectible finding. First up, let's go ahead and go with the combat. This game can be really hard. I've talked about that already. Enemies hit like a bullet train, and you're going to really see the shrines that act as, bonfires or respawn points for when you die. Throughout the game, you're going to be managing your health, stamina, and magic bars in intense dodge or block combat scenarios to return to where you last died to recover part of the currency for buying items and upgrades that you lost. Does that also sound familiar? Again, I mean this in the best way possible. There are many Souls-like games out there, but this truly does feel like the closest thing to the original formula, even with a completely different viewpoint. The isometric view of Tunic doesn't detract from the need for the player to closely conserve stamina, and also using timing to block, attack, and even healing. The true charm of Tunic's combat is the ability to approach it however you want, Eventually, you'll unlock items that basically allow for magic only, no healing playstyles, with a very high risk threshold. Combine this player agency with simple to understand but very hard to master combat, and you've got yourself a great start. Then throw in both visually and mechanically varied enemies throughout the game, and even harder, more grandiose boss fights, and you've got yourself a winner on your hands. And to kind of focus on the boss fights for a second, I think the game does a really good job of not overly using boss fights, but I do wish there were a few more. I never felt like there were enough, but at the same time, I'm not sure how many more could have actually been implemented into the game that didn't feel like they were just a repeat of some other type of boss, as each one kind of forces you to play in a certain type of way. My one true criticism of Tunic's combat is that the player always feels just a little bit too squishy, and at times the rooms full of enemies could provide a bit of an overbearing challenge. But in a weird way, it still feels fair, and I feel like I could improve myself. Another thing that I noticed during my playthrough was that for whatever reason, I'd always kind of forget about the shield, as opposed to just trying to roll out of the way of everything, which ultimately led me to running out of stamina and taking more damage. So I don't know if the controller layout just wasn't proper for me, but I did play on Xbox and I had a hard time with that. I don't know why. That could just be me and my brain not thinking that's the right button for that. But anyways, through the very great upgrade system in the game, you can always circumvent the ever-growing difficulty. Finding certain unique items in the world will allow the player to upgrade aspects of their character, such as attack damage, defense, health, stamina, and so on. This requires a shrine and an increasing amount of the currency in the game, but the gains from doing these are always necessary. Though upgrades aren't the only reason to explore, as there are also pages to an in-game manual which acts as a mystery, but eventually a big help as you find more pages. As you collect these pages, the mysterious language translates into helpful tips and even area maps. This is super fun and an interesting way of recreating the user manual for an old school game, and gives off so much charm and atmosphere for me as the player. One final comparison that I'd make to Dark Souls is actually the level design. And as a big fan of Dark Souls 1 and someone who thinks the first half of that game has some of the best level design of any game ever, Tunic was a breath of fresh air for me. It was never as completely intense or varied all throughout. Different areas would basically need to link back to each other in different forms rather than be completely separated. So I guess you could say that it never quite reaches that high. But again, it doesn't have to. This isn't a Dark Souls game, and this isn't something I need to compare. It's only an added bonus that the level design is satisfying to work through, unlock shortcuts back to your shrine, which is of course always helpful in circumventing long stretches of enemies as well as the slog of traversal. One thing that I really loved is that there's even shortcuts that don't even need to be opened. Some of them are just secret pathways that, like I said earlier while trying to talk about collectibles, you can miss them just by walking by them. It's something that kind of trivializes a second playthrough if you know where they're at, but I think it's really cool from maybe like a speedrun perspective. But going through these shortcuts, I always found myself having like a little funny haha moment, like, oh my gosh, I could have just skipped that whole thing if only I'd known this was here. One issue that I do take note with the level design per se is actually the progression in a sense. I didn't always know where to go and it wasn't always super clear. The in-game manual actually does a pretty good job of keeping you on track for the most part. But towards about the 2/3 mark of the game, I found myself, for a couple different objectives, getting a little bit turned around and a little bit lost more than anything. I wasn't sure where to go, and I wasn't sure exactly what I needed to do, especially one point after you get all 3 keys, and you'll know what I mean when I say that. Regardless, after a bit of time, I was able to figure out and find exactly what I needed to do. Unfortunately, that did come with a bit of tedium. And while there are technically maps within the game's manual, I don't think this is proper. As heavily influenced as Tunic seems to be on these older games like the original Zelda games, with obviously a lot of modernized takes, it's unfortunate that a very simple map couldn't be implemented to kind of guide the player in some general direction. Something that, if nothing else, I would have loved to have seen for an accessibility feature. Much like how the game features a few like no fail mode or things like that make it to where the game is playable for just about anyone if you really want to. But really, that's everything I have to say about Tunic. It's a simple plot and one whose story lies truly in the experience of the player. The beautiful visual style and decent enough audio help the player enjoy the experience, as they must overcome sometimes overbearing difficulty in a myriad of ways. Small nitpicks aside, I believe Tunic is near perfect considering the $30 price and the playtime and the sense of joy you'll get out of playing it. Satisfying upgrades as well as level design, and once again, I can't stress this enough, the very calming atmosphere that is created here is something that can't be overstated. You really do need to play this game, and this is one of the highest praises I've ever given a review on this channel. Once again, you can check out Tunic basically for free $99 on Xbox Game Pass, or you can buy it for $30, and I recommend even paying full price for this. A lot of times I can recommend a game at reduced price, but no, I truly believe this is worth the $30 value, and this is one that I could honestly see myself coming back to after a year or two. Nothing too crazy. I'm not one big into getting shorter times, and it's not a game that really asks for that, but it is something that I would love to re-experience again, something that I have the similar feelings with Firewatch, a game that has no multiple endings, but I love replaying just for the experience alone. But there you go, that's my review of Tunic, a very great game and one that I'm excited to see more from the developer in the future. My name is Falling Herds, thank you so much for watching this video. If you haven't seen it yet, go ahead and check out my Trek to Yomi review. It wasn't as big for me as this one was, so you can go over there and see me be a little bit more negative. I really don't even mention anything negative in this video. I thought it was a little jarringly difficult at times, but yeah, I'm just rambling at this point. Anyway, I do a lot of information videos and things like that, so if you want to check that out, go ahead. Anyways, subscribe or like the video. Thanks, bye.